Uh, in the last class, some of you were anxious to know the references the teaching assistants must have shared with you. Today I will give you two important quotations and then I'll come to my primary reference in the classes I have taken with you are primary works. I usually do not rely on secondary commentaries, but today I will share with you the problems in reading Emile Durkheim. Now, for French students, the division of labor in society was available in the original French from 1893, and then the second book, The Rules of Sociological Method in French, was available from 1895. Then Suicide in French was available since 1897. In 1902, Durkheim revised his French book, The Division of Labor in Society, and in 1903 he published a joint book with his nephew, dear friend and collaborator Marcel Mauss. It is called Primitive Classification. And then in 1912, the French edition of the elementary forms of religious life was published. Now, what is the condition or what has been the history of Durkheim's book in the English language? The first book in English was published in 1915, and this was not the first book which Durkheim wrote in French. Therefore, for students reading Durkheim in the English language, the first book came in 1915. The name of the book was The Elementary Forms of Religious Life. It was retranslated again in 1995. The second book in English language was published in 1933. The name of the book was The Division of Labor in Society. It was retranslated in 1984. Now, the third book of Durkheim was published in 1938, and the book was called The Rules of Sociological Method. It was retranslated in 1982. Then, in 1952, his book Suicide was published. It was retranslated in 2012. His last book, which is a collection of essays, was published in English language in 1957, Professional Ethics and Civic Morals. Therefore, you see that until 1952, when Suicide was published, Durkheim was read and understood through commentaries, primarily of Talcott Parsons. The Structure of Social Action, 2 volumes. And then came Raymond Aron's book, Main Currents of Sociological Thought, again in 2 volumes. I know that most of you are not very comfortable with reading the original text, even though today we have much more accurate and reliable English translations of Emile Durkheim, Karl Marx, and Max Weber. Secondly, I have been telling again and again that you will have to change your habit of graduation. Unlike your graduate days, you are not provided textbooks that you will read one book and everything will be put in there. Rather, we are training you as senior students how to read about man and society through the original research works, classics, which are the foundation of sociology, popularly known as the science of society. Now, yesterday I gave a panoramic view about the concept of society, which was based on the books I have shared with you as compulsory and suggested readings, but it was also based on my understanding of the history of sociology. And for my understanding, you can consult the history of sociological thought edited by Barnes. I also relied yesterday on two books. One, The Republic by Plato. It is easily available as ebook, and I was referring to particularly chapter 6 in that book, where he is discussing about democracy, dictatorship, and the rule of law. I was also referring to Edmund Burke's book on the French Revolution. Edmund Burke was the only contemporary who had criticized the ongoing French Revolution, and he echoed the same caution which Plato had echoed in the 6th chapter of the Republic, namely social consequences of revolution, which usually lead to totalitarianism, dictatorships, violence in the name of democracy. Today, I will focus myself to the division of labor in society, and I will refer to the 1984 edition published by Free Press. It is a new translation. And from this book, actually, this is the book we have gave you in the compulsory reading. Particularly, I am referring to today the preface of this book, written by Stephen Lukes, perhaps the most authentic scholar of the works of Emile Durkheim. Then I am referring to this book's introduction, written by Lewis A. Cozer. Lewis A. Cozer and his Masters of Sociological Thought, which is also recommended to you as suggested reading. It is one of the most reliable commentary so far as Durkheim is concerned. But in case you have seen this book, primarily written for the undergraduate students, it had many other social thinkers side by side, Marx, Weber, and Durkheim. I am not referring to the commentary in today's lecture, rather, I am referring to the introduction he wrote to the division of labor in society, new translation in 1984. And then from this edition, I am referring to 4 pages of Durkheim. I have taken quotations from page number 7, page number 151, page number 171, and page number 274. It was not needed that I should go in such detail, but since we are roughly covering the first quarter of the semester, I wanted to share my style of reading and teaching. I rely on the original and I usually do not change even a better word for the original. Therefore, in case you are familiar with the Indic tradition of learning and teaching, there is something which is called Sabda Praman. The words and sentences spoken by a person who doesn't take liberty with classical texts or any text for that matter. In case you are interested, I can give you a reference for each of my sentence, but then it may become a little lengthy and boring. Therefore, I will request you to rely on my lectures, both in the class as well as on YouTube. And you can quote me because I am directly taking it from the original text. I am not giving you my interpretation. I am not giving you even my translations. Now, when it was originally published in 1893 in French, the division of labor in society was the first book of Emile Durkheim, as well as the first sociological classic in the world. And once you underline this well-known fact, you should understand, if you decide to read the book from first page to the last page, including the preface and introductions written for the English translation by Stephen Lukes and Louis Koger, you will have sufficient material, sufficient insight, sufficient heuristic data which will help you read other books by other sociologists, whether in this course or in any other course. I am not used to this style of talking, but I had promised you I will adjust to your pace, not because it is a new batch, every batch is a new batch, because I am teaching for the first time online. And I understand the limitation of reading online as a student, and my student days are still continuing. Uh, the book, as I shared in one of the early classes, the content of the book is concerned with the division of labor in industrial society. Some of my fellow students in my age group as well as in my teachers' age group uh, usually said that this book is about capitalism and the division of labor. This is the title of Anthony Giddens' book or his commentary on Marx, Weber, and Durkheim. I think it is erroneous to call it capitalism. I think at least Emile Durkheim never used this word in any of the books. The case of Marx is different because he was a student of philosophy. In the case of Max Weber is also different because he was also not a student of sociology. Durkheim is very original, very innovative, and very challenging at the same time. Why? Because he is not defensive about the science of society, that is sociology. He was trained as a student of sociology, and there is moral assertion of Durkheim that it is only sociologists who can study society holistically. Others deal with fragments of society, fragments of man, fragments of human condition, fragments of human pathos, fragments of human happiness. But it is only sociology which can give a holistic picture of society as a whole, society as sui generis or sui generic. French sui generis, English sui generic means sovereign and autonomous. For others, the situation was very different. For example, before Emile Durkheim wrote this classic, The Division of Labor in Society, most sociologists were debating altogether a different question. What was the most important academic question for political economists like Adam Smith? They were primarily concerned with economic efficiency, the volume of production, and they were anticipating all around prosperity on the foundation of industrial production of goods and services. Adam Smith saw more good in the industrial mode of production. He believed that humanity will experience unlimited prosperity and the fruits of industrial mode of production will be equally distributed through the market. He believed in a liberal utopia of market economy which will be dominant than the state, the military society, and the civil society. Now, in case you ask me why you had not heard this word military society in your undergraduate days, I will say that was not your teacher's fault. It was the fault of his teachers or her teachers. Now what happened? Although India was a colony of the British Empire and the East India Company, and we had two Indian sociologists who worked on this topic, namely Ram Krishna Mukherjee, a Marxist sociologist who worked on the East India Company as a sociologist. And then there was A.R. Desai, again a Marxist sociologist, who has studied the social background of Indian nationalism. Both books trace the history of modernity in India. Of course, they were referring to colonial modernity during the East India Company and British Raj, but they were also referring to nationalist modernity of the freedom struggle. Historian Bipin Chandra had termed this economic nationalism. But there is another fine social scientist, primarily a historian, Tapan Rai Chaudhary, who wrote a book, Europe Reconsidered, and another historian, Dipesh Chakravarti, who wrote Provincializing Europe. Both are well discussed, well researched books of social science in India, and some of you will study as part of your optional courses these books as part of your optional course on India. But the tragedy is this, that most Indian sociologists do not read the father of British sociology. His name was Herbert Spencer. Herbert Spencer was the father of British sociology, the way Auguste Comte is considered as the father of French sociology, and Bastian is regarded as the father of German sociology. Emile Durkheim is regarded as the father of modern sociology or father of sociology as academic discipline. But what strikes me is the similarity and divergence of the following major sociologists of 19th century, namely Herbert Spencer. He is talking about military society and industrial society. Tonnage, Ferdinand Tonnage, the German sociologist, is talking about community and society. Emile Durkheim is talking about mechanical solidarity and organic solidarity. And Karl Marx and Max Weber, they are talking about modern society and traditional society. Of course, there are differences. Of course, there should be differences, but there is a very important commonality, and for commonality I will not use the term uniformity. In sociology, the common or similar need not be uniform. For example, uh, there can be two different types of societies which are different in form, but they may have one common element. Now, except Herbert Spencer, nobody talks about military society and industrial society. Had they taken into account Spencer's classification, and they would have equated Tony's work or Henry's main work about society organized around a status and society organized around contract. Durkheim's work would not have been such a path-breaking work. Now, what is so distinctive about Emile Durkheim's work, which other 19th century and early 20th century sociologists had missed? It was the question about the utilitarian concept or the social contract theory of society as untenable. I will quote from Durkheim. He says that there are, this is from 1903 primitive classification, which he wrote with Marshall Moss, and I am quoting from him. Men classified things because they were divided into clans. CLANS. Clan is an element of tribal organization, which is usually organized through blood or marriage. Then he says, then both of them, Durkheim and Moss, say the model of all classification is the society. Then there is a third quotation: society is the unique whole or totality to which everything is related. Their next quotation is, the classification of things produces the classification of men. Their next quotation is, primitive classifications generated the first concepts or categories enabling men to unify their knowledge. Then they write, it constituted the first philosophy of nature. Then they write, in these classifications, the origins of logical procedure are rooted. These procedures are the foundations of scientific classifications. Now, why this is important, although we are not reading primitive classification here, rather we are reading his first book, but we are reading his first book more than 100 years after. Therefore, we must understand how Durkheim conceptualizes the division of labor as a classification. Why division of labor was needed at all? Durkheim does not say that in mechanical solidarity there is no division of labor. Therefore, it is wrong to say that the division of labor is found only in organic solidarity or modern industrial society. They are referring to a very complicated, elaborate division of labor. Now, what was the basic difference between the division of labor in pre-industrial society, this term is used by Marx, and the industrial society? In the pre-industrial society of Marx, or the community of tonnage, or mechanical solidarity of Durkheim, or the military society of Spencer, the division of labor is around three categories: the age set and the gender set. The age set, the father's generation and the grandfather's generation and the children's generation. Women and men. Therefore, work was divided around, division of labor was around either age group or gender lines. And how it was done? The whole product, the whole process was divided. For example, in many tribal societies, men did hunting and women did farming, agriculture. In case you read Origin of Family, Private Property, and Estate by Frederick Engels, he says that hunting is the invention of men and agriculture is the invention of women. Now, usually the hunted meat was cooked by men and the agricultural food was cooked by women. So far as clothing is concerned, in every family, first the women will have clothes and then the men will have clothes. Because cloth was something which was bought from the heart or the mela, the traditional equivalent or homologous. Homologous is something which look different but which had similar social function. This is a term which was popularized in sociology by Claude Lévi-Strauss, who was heavily influenced by structural linguistic Saussure and sociologist Emile Durkheim and Marcel Mauss. Homology is the same thing which R.K. Merton said, functional equivalence. Therefore, you can be innovative in writing when you make a classification of function. Therefore, in mechanical solidarity, one man made flag with other men of similar age group. Another set of men made clothes. The third set of men made breads. In the same way, women participated in agricultural practices and they cooked food. But when you are in charge of something, this is from two books, Evans Pritchard's The Newer and Marcel Mauss's The Gift. These two books are very important because they give a different answer to the Hobbesian question of social order. One friend had raised his voice by saying that Thomas Hobbes was the first person to define individual. No, but yes, he was the first person who posed the question of social order. Hobbes said that without a state, he said without the church, he said without the police, he said without the military, you cannot maintain social order in society. And to a large extent, Max Weber and Marx agreed with this Hobbesian proposition with minor modifications. Karl Marx disagreed that man is selfish, brutish, and naughty by nature, but he also agreed that at some point of history you need a state and religion. Max Weber agreed with Hobbesian concept of man, but he did not believe that the state should be autonomous. Rather, he pleaded for the autonomy of the market or laissez-faire on the lines of Adam Smith. For them, Hobbes, Henry Maine, Herbert Spencer, society emerges out of a social contract, which was also advocated by Rousseau. They provide a very instrumental reasoning for the existence of society. Emile Durkheim disagreed with both concepts of Hobbes. He said man's concept and the concept of social order provided by Hobbes is faulty. He said in tribal societies, primarily of Australia, but also elsewhere, are not barbaric or savage society or anemic society where there is no order. According to Emile Durkheim and his students, followers like Evans Pritchard, Marshall Moss, Malinowski, A.R. Redley Brown, Levi Strauss, it is not necessary that social order will be provided only by the state or only by the organized religion called church. It can be provided, for example, among the newer by kinship organization. It can be provided, according to Claude Lévi-Strauss, by totemic beliefs or totemism. Therefore, in Savage Mind, written by Claude Lévi-Strauss, which is an elucidation of Durkheimian concept of division of labor and primitive classification, he says that the human mind in savage society is as developed as the human mind in the most developed urban industrial society of United States of America. Therefore, what is division of labor's salient feature in Durkheim? In one sentence, Durkheim says the division of labor challenges the social scientist to give an answer. How selfish individual of Hobbes, how the utilitarian individual of Henry Maine, how the social contact of Rousseau and Henry Maine produce a morally cohesive social order. And he says it is provided by a moral commitment, a civic religion. Unless and until there is a civic religion, there is a moral agreement in society. There is a moral consensus in society. Even war cannot be fought. To fight a war to win a war, you must need agreements about the concept of war as the highest arbitrator of peace. To understand the coercive power or monopoly of violence vested in the state, you must understand the moral agreement about the necessity of a state for maintaining law and order in a very complicated division of labor induced industrial urban society of Western Europe and the new world of United States, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, etc. Thank you.